Well, I appreciate the turnout tonight. Thank you for being here. I'd like to thank Abby and the SCIP program. I'd like to thank Lincoln Public Schools, Rush Ewing specifically, as well as Lincoln Southeast for being host tonight and all of you for turning out. As indicated, I am Outreach Coordinator within the Attorney General's Office. My responsibility is community relations and consumer education across our 93 counties. I've had the benefit of serving in 2 administrations now, and this is a passion. As a father of a 13, soon-to-be 14-year-old daughter, the very issues that we're talking about tonight are the issues that my wife and I are confronting in our family on a daily, weekly, semester, and annual basis. So I bring a lot of personal zest to this as well because of its importance. But this is a very broad topic that we're going to be attacking tonight, and to do it any level of justice in the hour to hour and a half that we have, I'm going to do my very best to define the tip of a very large iceberg and hope that whets your interest enough to want to explore a little bit more beneath the surface on your own using the resources and references that I'll be providing largely at the end of the presentation. I also have some takeaway materials for you tonight for those who are interested. And if you'd like a copy of the slide deck, I will make that available to you all as a PDF through the SCIP website. I believe that's how you would prefer to distribute it for any of those of you who would be interested. With that, we're going to be talking about the broad topic of digital citizenship, which I have applied some necessary narrowing to, and that is why I've come up with the topic of rules of the road for safely navigating the information superhighway. I'm going to expound on that theme momentarily, but before I get into the theme, I just wanted to establish the primacy of the cell phone. First, though, to put you all at ease who are worried about today's children in a 21st century, highly digitized, highly mobile, highly device-driven, and social media-drenched environment, not to worry. We're still talking largely teenage behavior. And as this quote represents, teenage behavior has not changed that much over time. It's the tools that are available to our teenagers today that give us as parents and adults pause. But to our children, it's as natural as the tools that we used in our day for communicating with our peers, our friends, our romantic interests, and what have you. So not to panic because of the almost earthquake that is going on in technology, where change is occurring on a far more frequent basis. The more things change, the more they stay the same, hence the foundation of the quote. Now, the primacy of the cell phone is what I promised, and here from Pew Research. Most of the statistics that I'm quoting here on the front end are from Pew and are recent within the past 24 months. We're looking at the fact that 88% of our teenage youth have a cell phone, with 75% of that group having a smartphone, a very powerful computer by any definition, in their palm, in their purse, in their possession. And the reason that they have that cell phone, first and foremost, isn't to make telephone calls. In fact, you'd be surprised, in terms of prioritization, the 5th most common use of a cell phone is to make telephone calls. The number 1 use of a cell phone is to stay connected to the tribe, and doing so through text messaging. So texting is what goes on in the overwhelming majority of the cases, followed very closely, in case you're interested, by internet connectivity. Basically, checking one's Facebook status or any of the other popular social media platforms, from Instagram, which is a Facebook product, to Snapchat, which is growing like a weed in terms of its overall popularity, Twitter, and a number of other apps, including some dangerous apps that we'll be looking at towards the end of the program. But over 90% of our teens are using internet access as the second most common reason for having a smartphone in order to connect with social media, and doing so on a frequency of at least daily. Over 90% are accessing the internet daily. You see, 1 in 4 are accessing it incessantly. And this would take me off topic, but is where I will sometimes pose it that social media is antisocial. I say that largely because, and this has recently come out and really caught my attention, and though I won't delve too far into it, I think it's worth noting that one of the early investors in Facebook, a man by the name of Sean Parker, who also founded Napster, recently was interviewed on Axios, which is a 21st century media company, website, and news channel. And he indicated that as he and others behind Facebook, including Mr. Zuckerberg, were designing the product, that they designed it to be addictive, if you will, to have people want to connect to their social media account with increasing frequency. Doing so in a manner that largely became addictive. They were getting a dopamine hit in the brain, a feel-good hormone, an endorphin. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know exactly what generates that feel-good sense, but it was a desire to connect for the social acceptability. It became a loop that when I connected to my Facebook, I found out that I had an increase in the number of friends. I had a like, or an increased number of likes, or there were retweets, or what have you. And so constantly going back for that social acceptability do loop of I'm okay. Well, what that did, I want to raise a daughter who is absolutely self-confident, which I believe will come through a sense of self-insight and awareness to build that self-confidence to become self-actualized. Well, in the social media platform, the emphasis is less on the self and more on the group awareness. Am I okay according to the group standard, according to how many likes I have gotten, according to how many retweets, and what's my friend count? And consequently, groupthink takes over for the self-actualized, self-aware person, and I think that's where we kind of disassemble the core building block of the society, which I think is through strong self-actualized individuals. There's my editorial, I'll move on, but it's that 24%, which is right here, that concerns me, because that's a neurotic tendency in my personal opinion. Now, showing that social media is extremely popular. The most popular of the social media platforms is Facebook, followed by Instagram, which is a Facebook product, followed by Snapchat, growing like a weed, and Twitter. Now, these are the platforms that are most popular, but most used, pretty much the same order, but at a far smaller percentage. 71% have, but only 40% use Facebook. 52% have, but only 20% use Instagram, and the like. With that, having established the primacy of the cell phone and what it's primarily used for, which is staying connected to the tribe, I'm now going to dive into the presentation more formally, and I'll begin it by putting forth a meme. For those of you who have younger faces in the audience, this is ancient history because it dates back 48 years ago this summer. But it's a worthwhile picture with a thought-provoking caption, and it is Man on the Moon, Buzz Aldrin, and couldn't be more accurate. We got to the moon with a computer far less powerful than the garden variety cell phone in the possession of the adults and the youth in this room. By that, what I refer to is this. The guidance and navigation system in the Apollo spacecraft was approximately 140,000 lines of written software code. The average app today, is 110,000 lines of written software code. But if you or your teen is at all typical, they have likely 2 to 3 dozen apps on their phone and access 8 to 10, maybe a dozen on a daily or weekly basis, all at that 110,000 or more lines of code. The Facebook app for phones is 500,000 lines of code. All of this is being managed by the CPU at the heart, the chip at the heart of the smartphone. meaning that today's smartphone is easily yesterday's supercomputer and a very powerful computer in its own right by any measure or definition today. Well, we've learned through the popular media, through however many reboots of the Spider-Man franchise, that with great power comes great responsibility, right? So, I try to draw a parallel. What other form of power is coming into the lives of our loved ones, our teenage youth, our children? And the only thing that draws a parallel in my mind is when we hand the keys to the family automobile to our child at 15 and 16 in order to equip them to be independent and mobile. And we do so with great caution, in that we would never think of handing the keys over to our child without the proper foundation being laid and the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to practice. Perfect practice, making perfect performance, and so we have a year of driver's education granted to our children, beginning with a week or two in the classroom before they're put behind the wheel, before they're driving parking lots around pylons, and then on back roads, and ultimately graduating to the highways and byways, but practicing over and over again. And even then, when the license is issued, it's restricted for a time because they need to demonstrate conclusively that they can operate and handle the awesome responsibility given to them in a safe, responsible, and respectful manner. So, as the slide I put forth here asks somewhat rhetorically, when it comes to our children accessing the information superhighway, as the World Wide Web is sometimes known euphemistically, via their vehicle of choice, which is the smartphone, but can also be the tablet, the laptop, the personal computer, the desktop computer, what level of preparation, what level of guidance and direction are we giving? And I say rhetorical because I think the answer is quickly recognized as little or none. And the reason that we offer little or none is that we assume because they're accessing and moving into traffic from a safe place, home, school, the classroom, the hallway during passing time, the back seat of the car as they're being transported to and fro, the kitchen table, the family room, the bedroom, that if they're accessing from a safe place, that no harm can befall them. And yet we crash and collide. We find that our children are crashing and colliding with one another routinely through elements of bad driving, whether it's road rage induced or simply through immaturity, but manifestations such as cyberbullying and sexting and elements that mar a digital footprint and become points taken off of a license. And what all of this comes together to prove to us is that we need, as good, responsible parents, guardians, and mature adults, to provide better guidance and direction to our youth in this very powerful area of responsibility. So we need a digital driver's license, because without a digital driver's license and the proper prep of a form of driver's ed, accidents do happen. What do we do when we enroll in driver's ed? We spend the first day looking at accident scenes to increase our awareness, scare us straight, and let us know of the awesome responsibility. Here's a case, relatively recent, where we have an underclassman freshman and an upperclassman junior or senior. The upperclassman threatens the freshman to a fight on school grounds, and the freshman had the presence of mind to say no. Thinking that he had defused the threat, at the end of the day, crosses the busy street to go to the U-stop to the McDonald's that's resident there. The upperclassman is waiting, jumps him from behind, and basically assaults. Now, ultimately that fight was broken up, but with the individual who suffered the assault was one of his very best friends. And rather than being an upstander and himself standing in to break up the fight, what did he do? He took out his cell phone and filmed the entire event. One of our legislators, finding this out, was infuriated, incensed, and introduced legislation to make that type of bystander activity in the filming, that they were an accomplice or an accessory to assault. Now, that did not move out of committee in the past session, but it goes to show the increasing level of intolerance and disgust at the lawmaking level, if you will, that if you don't police your own behavior, we're going to institute guidelines and procedures and rules in your place. Then we had this recent occurrence, which is still unfolding, and as an active investigation, I cannot bring a lot of insight as to where exactly we sit here. But on September 6th, in the community of Fairbury, was a report that off campus, in someone's home, at least 2, if not more, individuals were filmed in the act of mature relations. Filmed. And then that film, as so often happens, was distributed. And it was distributed to at least 20 other students at Fairbury High. And from those 20 students, then began the process of going viral so that throughout Jefferson County and surrounding counties, we had a major incident that continues to unfold. The ages of the individuals that were involved ranged from 14 to 18, 19. And the question is, as the law is in process of being applied, is what is our sexting law? Our sexting law is our child pornography law. I'll show it to you a little bit later. It's chapter 28, which is crimes and punishment, section reference 146303, which is again, the Child Pornography Prevention Act. We have the potential for multiple individuals at this high school for an act that they thought might have been fun, might have been mischievous, might have been teasing, might have been borderline bullying, might have just been, oh my gosh, look what's going on here, and therefore gossip, grist. Now we have the potential for multiple felonies. Furthermore, telephones have been confiscated. And in that confiscation, those telephones will not be returned. If you're one of the lucky few that has your eye on an iPhone 10 and has $1,000 to part with, or maybe, what is it, $750 for the new iPhone 8, can you imagine having that phone confiscated by the police? Because now it's state's evidence. You're not getting that phone back. So understand that there are consequences to behavior that you might enter into casually, and that it's what you do not know that has the greatest potential to hurt you. And I want to bring insight and awareness into some of those areas yet this evening. Now, we have a digital driver's license of sorts. It is a program that is catching on nationally. It's known as digital citizenship. It has been developed and put forth by an educator and IT expert in a middle school here in America, containing 9 elements or 9 points. Very hard to read in this infographic, but it's digital health and wellness to literacy, the law, etiquette, commerce, access. And I could spend 5 minutes talking on each point and think that I sounded very well informed and quite erudite. And I'm pretty well convinced that I would lose you as an audience. I would bore you to tears because it would not be memorable, in that it would not have impact, and therefore you would not consider the time well spent this evening. I am not interested in wasting your time nor mine. I would like to, for the hour and 15 that we're together, have an impact and have you talking about this. Not only tonight as you drive home, but maybe around the dinner table as a family as early as tomorrow, and then amongst your friends, both adult and teenage friends, for days, even weeks to come. So I'm going to assure you that I'm well aware of the digital citizenship program across all of its 9 points. I'm going to cut to the chase in the interest of impact. I'm Ryan. These are my rules. There are 5 of them. First and foremost, you are not, don't go near the speaker, Ryan. You are not invisible when you go online. Each and every one of us has a digital footprint by which we are known, can easily be found, and becomes a reputation-making element that we can no longer escape from now or for the rest of our lives. Consequently, we need to, at this moment, and from this moment forward, behave online as we do in person, if not even better. The reason that we're not invisible when we go online, rule number 2, is that we assume that it's great to be a 21st century consumer of all this digital technology, from social media platforms to apps to fascinating websites. How wonderful to be empowered as a consumer. Caution, you are not the consumer. You are the product. You are making, knowingly or more likely unknowingly, a trade. You, in exchange for having free access through Google, through Bing, through having free email, let's say, through Google or Microsoft or the like, you're paying for it in exchange for information about you, personally identifying information and other information that will include everything from your basic searches to your likes, to your dislikes, to the searches that you would do that you would hope that no one would ever find out about. All of that is part of your digital footprint material. And you are leaking this information, giving it away through more sources, through more points of disclosure than you're aware of. And you're giving express permission to leak this information. Let's be aware of where we're leaking the information and stop leaking the information in our own personal, selfish best interest. Third, any data that you post online is not private data, it's public data. So, any data that you post online in any format is not considered private through something known as the third-party doctrine, which we'll look at but briefly. Consequently, we need to self-reflect before we self-disclose. What we thought was private can become public in an instant. And the case in Fairbury is proving how very private behavior has now become a very public confrontation and problem. Those 3 points used to be the one, but they're so important in my mind that I've broken them out into the 3. And I dwell in this area because there are immediate things that we can do as individuals and as parents to protect our children to improve their footprint. It's important that we increase awareness about the permanency of the footprint. I call it a digital tattoo. The reason that it's important and why I dwell is that there's something known as the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect dates back approximately 100 years to Hawthorne, Illinois, to Western Electric, part of the old Bell system, and to a production line and how they can increase throughput in that factory. And they brought in a high-priced consultant. And after weeks, bordering on months, even years of underproductivity, when the consultant was online and tried to vary the environment, in some instances to make it worse, in other instances to make it better, and then measure against the baseline of a presumed level of productivity, no matter what the consultant did, productivity was off the charts. They dubbed it the Hawthorne effect, in that individuals, once they know, or once they knew in this case, that they were being watched, chose to self-modify and manage their behavior in keeping with expectations. Social norms, professional expectations, but once individuals know that they are being watched, tend to self-monitor, self-manage, and self-maintain behavior. I would like everyone in the audience to know the permanency of their digital footprint, know that they are being watched, where they're leaking the information, who's capturing it, how, and with that awareness, begin modifying their behavior. If they do, then the negative manifestations of cyberbullying and sexting, which are points 4 and 5, will largely begin the process of taking care of themselves. Should they not, the 4th rule about cyberbullying is that it has consequences, both under policy and under law. Consequently, learn to communicate appropriately. And then sexting it gets back to the original quote, that teenage behavior is not that much different today than it was years ago. The tools and techniques have changed. Sexting is a manifestation of relationship development based on the notion of mutual self-disclosure. I share something of a personal, private, confidential nature with you, hoping that you reciprocate in kind, share alike with me, and on that basis of mutual self-disclosure, a relationship is developed based on trust. Self-disclosure is the element to drive the trust. Trust is the foundation of all good relationships. But when it comes to the sharing of sexually suggestive images and text in cyberspace involving partial or full nudity, it's an especially risky form of self-disclosure. And it potentially butts against the law, as the individuals at Fairbury High are finding out, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. So, know the risks and the potential consequences. With that, we've introduced the entire evening through these rules. The rest is going to be expounding on the rules themselves to prove the case, and then we'll wrap up with a number of good resources and other cautionary notes to send you home with. But before we back out the drive, as we're going to begin this trek through the information superhighway, we have to learn about the seatbelt rule. We have to apply our seatbelt. Our seatbelt rule here is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, widely known as COPPA. And what this is designed to do, how many of you are parents to someone under the age of 13? Okay, it's going to be applying in your households, because what this is designed to do is to protect the disclosure of your child's personally identifying information through websites that will collect, use, and potentially sell that information. And you as a parent are to be empowered to make the choice as to whether or not your child is allowed to be on that site, and can that information be collected, and can it be distributed. You give express permission, either through a pop-up window that will be presented on screen or an email authorization. But this is a law. It requires your full consent, and this is the type of personal information that we're talking about here, from name, address, phone numbers, physical whereabouts, photos, videos, audio recordings. Here's really why. Information from the FBI and added to through the Department of Justice, both at the federal level and at the state level, is that we know with relative certainty that 20% of our teenage youth, which I'm defining broadly here as age 10 through 19, are receiving unwanted sexual solicitations via the web. 2/3 of these solicitations are aimed to our daughters. 22% of those, so roughly 20% times the 22%, 5%, are targeting children at the 10 to 13 age range. So that you know what we're talking about here in Nebraska. Individuals 10 to 19 is roughly the size of Lincoln's population base. It is, give or take, 260,000. And so it splits almost down the middle, 130,000 in the 10 to 13 group, 130,000 in the 14 to 19 group. But the sex offenders are accessing our children through their social networking sites. And the information gleaned there to identify their home, their school, and all other information as to where that child might be found at any given point in time. Translation: when I apply the numbers, we have almost 52,000 youth divided by the 286 school districts that we have throughout the state, which means on a simple average basis within the school districts, we have 181 children at risk at any point in time. Now, granted, it's actually going to be more than that in the population centers, less than that in the smaller communities, but that is a huge problem and concern for all of law enforcement, especially the Attorney General, and why we spend so much time dialoguing, or monologuing in my case, on this topic. This is of serious concern. So, with our seatbelts on and a clear understanding as to why, and especially protecting the vulnerability of those under the age of 13, we will now merge into traffic, and we're going to talk about the permanency of the digital footprint. What it is essentially everything that you do online. From every search that you make, every page view, every click through, every download, every post, every like, every tweet, every retweet, And the minute that you hit send or forward, you are taking that footprint material and sending it from your timeline out of your control into someone else's timeline. And as it moves out of your ability to control, carefully consider future impact and implications. Because that data, that footprint material, is again your reputation maker going forward. And it can open doors for you or just as quickly close doors for you when it comes to opportunities in your immediate or not too distant future. What I mean by that is this. I made sure to update this data so that it reflected what we know through the beginning of this year. Over 90% of all professional recruiters are now accessing your, if you're the candidate's, social profile to take a measure and assessment of your character, more as a means of ruling you out of further consideration than ruling you in, as applicant tracking systems and admission profiles are overwhelming now that they're so easy to do through web portals and other online formats. And of those 90+% who are accessing the social media profiles, not quite half, but as you can see, well over 40% are finding information that gives them pause and has them reconsidering your or your child's candidacy. Whether it is that they are intending to go on to college, go on to trade school, go into the military, or join the workaday world, they're finding information that has them more than likely ruling out rather than ruling in. And specifically what they're finding, at least 1 out of every 3, is content related to illegal drug use or the premature consumption of alcohol. They are finding inappropriate photos, bringing in the sexting content of a partial or, as you can read, full or sexual nature. And then, as I've seen time and time again through screen captures that have been shared with me by school principals and administrators, the coarse dialogue that goes on in the texting and in the messaging as it is profanity laced, indicating, again, coarse behavior or potentially a lack of respect for one another. But know that determinations are being made before you're even invited in for the interview about your character based on your footprint material. Now, earlier we talked about the primacy of the cell phone, and we said that the primary means of the cell phone in the teenager's life was that they needed to connect to the tribe and do so through texting. The phone is a very powerful computer, but here I'd like to say that it's as powerful as any ankle bracelet that you, if you are confined to the home for whatever reason, that you would want to separate yourself from that ankle bracelet as quickly as you could, because it is a full-on tracking element, and there are so many points of potential data collection off that phone that I just wanted to make you aware. Every phone manufactured in the past 13 years has GPS on it. You can be found and located at any point in time in a footprint half the size of one of these octagonal tables, definitively. I recommend, unless you're a road warrior, that you turn that off, especially on your child's phone, for their own safety and well-being. But GPS is just going to locate you generally in geospace. If I'm law enforcement, I might want to locate you specifically, and the overwhelming, inescapable tracking element on a cell phone today is the mobile equipment identifier, the MEID. And on the majority of phones, I don't seem to have mine on me. How ironic. You can pull up your own MEID because the unlock code is available to you through star #06#. That 14-digit mobile equipment identifier is the unique social security number of your phone. Unless you're an AT&T user, you have what's known as an IMEI, an International Mobile Equipment Identifier. Doesn't unlock quite the same way. You'll find it under your settings and on your bill. But for the majority, it is star #06#. It's your mobile equipment identifier, and it's inescapable. If your phone is on, you're broadcasting exactly where you are and what you're doing through that MEID, and it's resident on 3 cell phone towers at any point in time, given any activity that you're engaging in, whether it's sending a text, accessing the internet, making a telephone call. If that phone is on, we have got you. It's inescapable. Now, something that you don't know is that over 40% of the apps that you're downloading onto your phone, you are giving the app express permission to track you specifically through your mobile equipment identifier. Most of the app manufacturers want to know, well, how many times are you accessing our app? And from what app did you come from? And how long did you stay with our app? And from our app, where did you go? Generally, that's very helpful information for marketing purposes. But why do they need to know specifically what you are doing? Or any one of us individually? It raises questions that put at risk our personal safety and security, certainly our reputation, also our independence. But that mobile equipment identifier is powerful to the point of being downright scary. It's not the only element of tracking. Most of us are accessing the internet now through Wi-Fi in our home, and the media access controller is essentially the license plate of the vehicle, the router. So now within the home, via the device and its mobile equipment identifier, and yes, your iPad has an MEID as well, we now know, okay, what device got into what vehicle by its license plate, where did it head via its ISP, its Internet Service Provider coordinates. That is the specificity of where you're going locationally. And the permission to track all of this information and use it in ways disclosed and frankly not disclosed is granted by you through the terms of service agreements that you're accepting blithely. As you download the app, it gives you the screen that says accept or decline. All of us accept, because how many of you have ever read a terms of service agreement? They're about 3,000 words long. We have one who has. Good for you. Well, this is what I'm talking about. Snapchat is a very popular social media platform, and they're really trying to mainstream it now. And you can tell stories through short videos and images, and the lure is that these images go away, when in reality, they might fade from immediate view on your phone, but they're still stored on a server, and they never go away. And anyone here under certainly my age knows how to do a screen capture in a second or two. Here from the actual terms of service agreement of Snapchat is what I'm talking about. What we are agreeing to, and we download this onto our phone, is that we are going to give Snapchat, when we take a snap, everywhere in the world forever without any thought of compensation to you for the benefit of taking and capitalizing on your data, yet allowing them to sell that data as many times over and make as much money off it as they possibly can, and even transfer later the rights to your data, the ability to do all of these things here in print. And what I really like, which I've put in the darker pink, is that they can do it on any technology platform existing today, or if it's not existing today and is developed and marketed later, and there's an application for your data in that brand new format, I don't have to come back and reobtain your permission. I own the data and can use it in that new platform as well. Forever and ever, amen, thank you very much, and this is typical. Consequently, oh, you're thinking, how can that be? This is as legal as I get here. This is the third-party doctrine. This is not once but twice tested all the way up to the federal Supreme Court level that says any information that you voluntarily share in public space is public information. And in America, social media platforms, everyone that we've talked about tonight, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, is public space. So users have no legitimate expectation of privacy. That's not Ryan's words. That is straight from one of the 2 cases found in favor of big data. This raises the privacy issues that I've already introduced in terms of privacy and security for our safety and well-being, privacy and reputation, which is the point that I truly seek to drive home tonight, and then privacy and our independence, because many times what that data is being used for is to manipulate our behavior, our purchase behavior and decision making. That is why when we go to a new page on the internet, all of the banner ads across the top and down the sides typically relate to one of our most recent searches, because that data is being captured, used to then position and present to us ads, so that the reason that the app is free is because we're collecting the data, and it's called monetizing the investment. Consequently, let's give you some tools and techniques to fight back. First and foremost, 10 to 13-year-olds, very vulnerable. Where do the cyberbullying incidences typically occur? It is the takeover of social media accounts. How? Because our 10 to 13-year-olds are very liberal with sharing their passwords, or they have simple, non-complex, dictionary-based passwords. It's their name and their birth year. It's their pet's name. It's Huskers 17. Whatever it is, let's all learn and encourage that we need to lengthen and strengthen our passwords. We need to do this in the wake of the Equifax data breach, by the way. If you'd like to prevent identity theft in your personal accounts, and you were one of the 145.5 million that did find their information breached, strengthen and lengthen your password. By that, go to 10 characters and then salt within those 10 characters an odd symbol or two. By that, ampersand, hashtag, @sign, exclamation point. I think you know what I mean. Here we have a dictionary-based word, snowman 04, for a birth year of a 13-year-old. And to strengthen it, this still says snowman 04. But you can see I've peppered it with symbols. I've done some uppercase, lowercase. I even spelled out one of the zeros. Snowman 04 can be cracked in approximately 1 second in the simplified form. The complicated form, if you will, the strengthened form, would take 17 hours. How do I know that? Here's a tool that, well, I'll get to the tool. This is what I'm talking about here, because in the techie world, this blog is extremely popular, and this is the author there being pictured, and he is proving that a 6-character password, which was standard about 8 years ago, can be cracked in less than a second, 2/100ths of a second to be exact. To prove to you that 10 characters is better, 10 characters would take about 10.5 hours. So just the addition of 4 characters and the permutations and combinations thereof. There's the 10.5 hours. Now, to prove that strengthening it by peppering in the odd symbol or two, 6 characters with the symbol goes to, golly, 1.3 minutes. And you're thinking, you know, that's not even worth bothering. Why are you showcasing that? Well, the difference between 2/100ths and 1.3 minutes is a 3/800ths time improvement. So if I take 3,800 times 10.5 hours, that should take me to the 4, 5, 6 month. You'd be surprised, because remember, I can drop in that odd symbol anywhere within the string. I might complicate it with 2 symbols. But the permutations and combinations across the range of symbols, it would take well over a half century to crack my password at 1,000 guesses a second. So go home, all of us, teach our children to strengthen their password, and teach them and yourselves to treat your passwords like your toothbrush. Do not share it, and change it often. Moving on from there, when it comes to your social media use, common sense is not in common supply. We have to think carefully. What are we posting? Where are we posting it? Who might see what I post? Does what I post contribute to a positive online reputation for self? What do we mean by that? If Mom were to find out what I was doing in my texts, in my tweets, and in my profile, would she approve? Or would she give me the crooked finger that says, sit down, son, daughter, we have to have a conversation? The mom test. You can automate this process. As adults, I recommend that you do this and consider doing it daily, at the very least weekly for your children. Maybe monthly at this time is often enough. But in your favorite search engine, type in Google Alert. This is what you'll be taken to. That is my name in quotes, Ryan Sothan, open, close, quote. I have directed the internet through the Google search engine to conduct automatically on my behalf a dragnet of the World Wide Web, and do so daily, and bring me new results and instances of my name across all web items, news hits, images, and videos and deliver it to me at my office email at 8 a.m. every day. And the reason that I do that is largely the role that I have in being a spokesperson for the Attorney General. It's a great CYA move, a necessary CYA move, but it tells me what's in the digital footprint, and here's what a Google alert looks like. I gave this presentation at a small school in southwest Nebraska, and a few days later, published in their newspaper, which is published once a week, came this link that says Nebraska Attorney General visits North Platte to address consumer fraud. Oh, I've actually updated my Google alert. And I can click on this link, and it takes me to the full article, picture, everything. I know precisely what new element of footprint material has been created around my name. All of us should do this to become aware of our footprint material. Not in tonight's presentation, but in one that I can come back and make. If you're worried that you have a muddied footprint and that there are too many negative references, there are ways that these search results can be managed and manipulated to suppress the negative, amplify the positive, and absolutely put your best foot forward. So all is not lost, but the process begins 1 foot at a time through the Google alert. Then, in addition to having the Google alert, you should review your social media privacy settings. The reason why is that Facebook is breached over 500,000 times per day. Now, Facebook is a worldwide company and has 1.3 to 1.4 billion users, and you're thinking 500,000 or more breaches daily, that's a spit in the ocean, drop in the bucket. Until you do the math. Because the 600,000 breaches times the 365 days a year is 219 million accounts breached, or 13% of the user base annually. If the Equifax breach was so mind-numbing because it impacted 145.5 million of us, and yet Facebook has breached 219 million users a year, and no one's up in arms about this, why? Why not? I'd be concerned if we were dropping 13% of all babies in the delivery rooms. Don't you think we'd have new process procedures, rules, regulations, lawsuits, lawyers? Yes, of course we would. We don't value our personal information enough. So let's learn to value by tamping down on our social media profiles. Get to know this page. This is the privacy and setting tools page within Facebook, but it gets complicated and gets complicated fast because there are 50 different Facebook privacy settings with 170 different options attached. And once you have updated and everything is humming the way you want it to, Facebook will say, we have a new terms of service agreement. We have a new iteration of our software, and they default everyone back to base by intent so that they can capture as much of your information as possible. The rule here, or the lesson, is that Facebook is not set and forget when it comes to your privacy settings. It's monitor in order to maintain. Oh, Ryan, that sounds like a lot of work. It's not a lot of work. You can automate the process fairly easily. Automated is not the right word. Make it easy on yourself. Do a Google search on top 10 Facebook privacy settings. You'll get a bazillion hits, and what I want you to do through those search engine results is just click, scan, and move on. Click, scan, move on. What it says, you're just acquainting yourself with and moving on. The moving on is key because you're going to see repetitive instances of the same setting being recommended time and again. So in your awareness, when you see that same setting a third or a fourth time, stop, take note, write it down. That is a setting that you want to enact on your machine. Case in point, very basic, I apologize, tag review. When your content, your name, your likeness, your post is going to be taken from your timeline and moved into someone else's timeline, it's also moving out of your ability to control. You should be alerted, and that's what the tag review does. It is an alert that allows you to see and approve of that tag. You can petition the user to take it down, and if they stubbornly persist and refuse to take it down, Facebook becomes your friend and they will help take it down. So tag review is important. Do that across the 9 other essential settings. This is not the only Techlicious. This is another page. This is a very recent article by them, The Complete Guide to Facebook Privacy Settings. You don't have to go and buy the Facebook for Dummies book. It's all available to you relatively inexpensively, i.e. free, on the internet with a simple search. 20 minutes invested through this manner, you'll double, if not effectively triple, your security. Then, this is the eye-opener that through the MEID and the leaking of information, I said earlier, stop leaking information. Most of us do not know that there is active capture and trafficking of our personal identifying information from the apps that we download onto our phone. This is a study published in Information Week of the top 180, give or take, most popular apps in the Android environment. And as such, we found that over 40% of the time, we were granting permission to have that mobile equipment identifier read. A third of the time, the personal information, which is not just our phone contacts, it is the reading, the parsing of our inbound and outbound text messages. So your privacy is being violated there, but is violated the right word when you're giving express permission through accepting the terms of service agreement, because it's disclosed. It's fully disclosed in the terms of service agreement. It's not a surprise. They've just made it hard for you to be aware. So how do you fight back? Well, you would download any one of a number of app permission managers that are available for free or at nominal charge. iPhone versus Android. Android is a far less secure phone. It's an open source system. It doesn't have the rigorous testing of its apps and the like. There are a bevy, a bundle, a bunch of these type of apps in the Android environment. Go to Google Play, type in App Permission Manager, look at number of downloads, user ratings, pick one. Much harder in the iPhone environment. I've chosen this app because it works dual platform. This works in the iPhone environment and in the Android environment with limitations. You can apply this and it will cover all of your mentions, all of your MEID, all of your permissions, everything on one of your key social media platforms. So if you're a big Facebook user, this would be the perfect tool to manage permissions in Facebook beyond what you would enact yourself. Once this is on the phone, interrogate your phone. Say, show me every single app on my phone where my mobile equipment identifier is being captured. Then you're empowered to make the decision. Do I value that app? Do I want to keep that app? Do I want to limit that app? Do I want to uninstall that app? Better the devil that you know than that you do not know. And this is just showing you in the Google Play Store, the rich variety. That's a screen capture of the first mentions under app permissions. With that, I'm now going to leave the digital footprint behind, having given you at least 5, if not 6 tools to increase awareness, and we're going to talk about some of the manifestations of road rage. And the first is cyberbullying. And in this section, we will define cyberbullying for what it is, because we have inconsistencies in reporting the exact amount of cyberbullying that is going on in schools across America. It's as little as 10%, it's as high as 90%, but it's based on the definition that is being applied to cyberbullying. Generally speaking, cyberbullying is increasingly coming under control and trending in the right direction in a downward slant. But we have many concerns along the way. So here is the new federally based definition that comes to us from the Center for Disease Control and the U.S. Department of Education that identifies cyberbullying as, and for what it is, unwanted, aggressive behavior that leverages a power mismatch, a power imbalance, where the bully has, for whatever reason, the upper hand and is using that upper hand to their distinct advantage. Whether they're bigger, better, stronger, better student, better off financially, more popular, it doesn't matter, but they're taking that advantage and they're using it to create incidences from that imbalance on a repeated basis that significantly harass, terrorize, threaten the individual. It encompasses all of these behaviors that are populating the screen, and I wanted to show you the actual in-statute reference to bullying here in Nebraska, and that way you can compare it to the now federally approved definition. We have a good definition. That definition is that it is an ongoing pattern of physical, verbal, or electronic abuse. The ongoing pattern is important because if your son or daughter is shoved into a locker during passing time in school and it happens once on the first day of school, they've been subject to rude behavior. That's not bullying behavior. But if it happens every single day and it's perpetrated by the same individual and other individuals, maybe the bully's friends, have caught on to that behavior, and because they see that that bully is allowed to do it, they think that they have license to do the same, and so now we have a group bullying. Now it's bullying behavior. The physical, verbal, or electronic is capturing the behavior across all of its potential applications. And we go so far as to define what school grounds constitutes, because even as you're being transported, let's say from Southeast to another school due to an athletic event or other, that on that bus and on that other school grounds, it's still on-campus behavior. Other states have gone so far as to define that off-campus behavior brought on campus becomes an on-campus school-based issue. We're not there yet. I think that would greatly conflict.
Is that in the works?
Pardon?
Is that in the works?
It depends on your legislator, but yes, a couple have tried to do that. They want accountability throughout the school system. It has not succeeded. It has never made it out of committee yet. And the key senator who first introduced that is now termed out. Now, here's what I'm talking about in terms of the statistics. This is another source that we reference, and it will be a site that we give you in the reference section. This is the Cyberbullying Research Center. And dating back to 12 years ago, but this is a 10-year span, 28% appeared to be the norm. It is now, as of 2 years ago, roughly 21%. So, given the many different ways of measuring bullying, once the Cyberbullying Research Center went back and applied the new definition, it brought into compliance, if you will, the actual rate of bullying across schools across America. And you can see that we're trending in the right direction with, generally speaking, a steady decline. That is good news. But here in Nebraska, on a broader basis, dipping even into our elementary schools, what we're finding is that roughly half of our children are indicating that they have been subject to some form of bullying attack, cyberbullying more specifically, in the course of the past month. The behavior specifically and their applicable percentages are as follows, and those that I have put in yellow are those that lend themselves quite readily to cyberbullying, the smartphone specifically, led by the name-calling, teasing, the spreading of rumors and lies, impacting 1 out of 3 to close to half of our children. And then you can see in the sexting arena, the 24%. I think that number tracks well nationally. However, I'm going to modify that percentage for you. It's not nearly that high when you look at who's doing the sexting and on what basis. So hang in for that. Now, most of us as parents are concerned as what are the warning signs and symptoms, and there are many, but first and foremost, the technology that your son or daughter is in love with, they will begin to show less favor with, and in fact, no interest in. Suddenly they're available to look you in the eye and engage in a responsible manner because the device is something that they seek to avoid. So avoidance or stress when they are using the device, especially when reading their text messages, you might notice that they have withdrawn from school, withdrawn from friends, withdrawn from family, that they have a difficult time modulating their emotions, that they might frequently be brought to tears or undue anger and frustration very, very quickly, and then disruptions in patterns of eating and sleeping. So what to do in response? From our office's perspective, the hardest thing to do, since this is engaging you, or more specifically your child's fight or flight response, is to ignore the message. You want to fight back. You want to defend yourself. But ignore the message, not the problem, the message. And you are responding to the problem if you forward. Because if someone says, you know, Ryan, you're a bald-headed jerk and you talk too much and you're boring. Oh, so you think I'm a jerk? Well, me And I'm forwarding this now to my posse of friends. Me and the 5 of us here think you're the bigger jerk and you're the bigger bore. Okay, I have just responded in a way that inflames the situation further, and under school policy and potentially under the law, I have now lost the benefits that are available through policy and law to protect me, because now who's to bless, who's to blame? It's a chicken or egg issue. Who's the bully? Who's the target? Which came first? You're both guilty. I'll punish you both accordingly. So what we want to teach first and foremost our children is to block. Block the negative input. And you can go right to Facebook and you can type in, as I've done here, in the Help Center, how do I block? You're taken to this page. It tells you in explicit detail, and the nice thing is that when you block in Facebook, there's no notification to the bully that you have disconnected from their feed. It's not like unfriending someone. So you block, and then you start compiling your evidence. Earlier I mentioned everyone knows how to do a screen capture. Take the screen capture, if not, do a copy, paste, print off the emails, build that dossier, hand it to a responsible choice of the child's choosing. Naturally, we advocate that that's mom and dad. Mom and dad aren't available, the child should feel empowered to choose. Well, maybe it's the mom or dad of my best friend. Maybe it's my big sister or brother. Maybe it's my coach. Maybe it's my counselor. Maybe it's my piano teacher. But have them pick a responsible adult and then trust that the responsible adult will take the information, engage with the system, and do the right thing. But along the way, I cannot advocate strongly enough, we do not want our children to suffer in silence. Too many are. What I'm intending here is to encourage the child to talk to someone in the peer group about the problem that they're having. To trust someone to be a good friend, because if their good friend came to your child and said, I'm having a problem, I'm having a difficult time with one of the students in my class, and he's made it to the point where I'm depressed and I don't even want to come to school, and I just want to drop out and no, I'd be happy to, you would do what you could to be the best friend that you possibly could be. Consequently, trust that your friends will want to demonstrate that they are a good friend, and they will help, because a burden shared is a burden halved, and the benefits of talking through this with a peer do help make the situation better. Then trust the system. Because the rules of the road is that the system is organized to provide consequence under policy and under law. And consequently, we need to communicate appropriately. And what I mean by that is that all of the laws of the state of Nebraska are available through this website, nebraskalegislature.gov, and you can type in bullying right here. And when you do, you are taken to the bullying statute, which is Chapter 79 under the education chapter. And this policy states that by school district, every district must have a bully education and prevention policy. It needs to be reviewed annually and as needed or necessary, updated for reasons of blah, 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 blah. Bullying is bad and not conducive to learning or your child's safety and welfare. My point here is that though these policies are instituted on the district level basis, I cannot advocate strongly enough that you as parents and you as students have a say in what this policy is in your environment. Because you students, it is what you tolerate, you are willing to tolerate, that will persist in the environment. And so almost like a peer review, which is a highfalutin term for documents that are submitted for review prior to publication, the peer pressure system and communicating at the peer level what's appropriate behavior, if we get the students involved through STUCO and what have you, it is what they will tolerate and they are willing to address that will persist or decline according to what they communicate. But have a say with the PTO and school administration. And you're allowed to fashion this process, because what I love about this law is that it is not Lincoln through the legislature saying one size fits all. Lincoln does not know best. You know best. Just like all politics is local, all problem resolution is best done closest to the source. Consequently, if you want to have a zero tolerance policy, you're entitled to. If Omaha wants to have a 3 strikes and you're out, they're entitled to. And if Grand Island says, you know, we're a sanctuary city, we want all bullies to come to Grand Island, they're entitled to, even though they all accept public tax dollars. This is the initiation of community-based standards. I think that's wonderful news. But failing policy implications, bullying is not against the law per se, because we have already made illegal the behaviors attached to bullying. There are 4: assault in the 3rd degree, terroristic threats, stalking, and harassment. And if you look at the definitions, and these are all under the Crimes and Punishment chapter, harassment is the bread and butter of typical bullying, because it means to engage in a knowing and willful course of conduct so that there is a premeditation. It is directed at a specific person, so there is a target in mind, and it seriously terrifies, threatens, or intimidates, pulling in these other definitions, that person, and serves no legitimate purpose. And the acting in a threatening or menacing manner, that's according to the victim's perception of the threat that they were under, not the bully's intent. Because if the bully is confronted, 9 times out of 10 what the bully will do is cop a plea that says, hey, I was just funning, I was just teasing, we were just joking around. How did I know that Ryan didn't know that we were just joking? That's blaming the victim. It is according to the perception of the victim here in terms of what menace of level or threat they felt that they were under. And as a cautionary note before we leave this section is that increasingly, not in Nebraska as of yet, but we are finding precedent in other jurisdictions across states nationwide that increasingly parents are being found liable for what their kids are posting in social media. So we have a vested interest as parents to make sure that that footprint material and how they are choosing to engage is on the up and up. I'm looking at the clock, and we will go through sexting fairly quickly. Sexting, defining it, and I'm going to, again, a fairly stringent definition put forth by the Cyberbullying Research Center, who also provides very useful analysis in this area, that sexting is the sending or receiving of sexually explicit or sexually suggestive images involving partial or full nudity, and it's generally communicated across a mobile device, cell phone being the dominant means. Typically shared between significant others. The problem becomes when it's shared outside of that intimate dyad. And what we're finding is that though the popular perception is that everybody is sexting, in reality it is a minority-driven behavior, and that it is well under half of our students. How far under? Significantly under. The youth participating range from a low of 8% to a high of 28%. So as we school our children, and especially as we school our daughters, and our concern there is if they feel that, well, Mom, Dad, they say that everybody is doing it, and I am not comfortable, and I am being outcast, and I'm in a quandary, just say, you're in the majority. Don't worry about it. That's minority-driven behavior. You have solid numbers in your favor. Don't feel bad. You are not odd. You are not unusual. You are not a prude. You are in the majority. Safety in numbers. Now, harking back to the opening quote, that this is just teenage behavior. It's the devices that have changed. I want to point out again from the Cyberbullying Research Center that what social media is being used for, it's how our teenage youth today flirt. It's no different than passing notes in school, but now we indicate to the object of our affection that we are interested through the digital platforms that are available to us. And it is how we feel connected and closer to one another. And this is especially true for males over females. But if you want to engage your child and say, hey, teach me what's going on, because boy, in our day, we had to date and we had to dial a number and ask someone out, and we had school dances, which don't seem to occur much anymore. How do you all express your interest? And you will learn, if your child is being honest with you, that there is a courtship rule game to follow, from stalking one another in Facebook to liking, to once you've liked, to friending, and once you've friended, to maybe posting, from posting, having a telephone number shared. That telephone number is not for making a call, it's to initiate a text, Then from the texting, maybe there's a face-to-face and a telephone call, and then a relationship is allowed to flower. The difficulty that we're having in the format is that because it is easy once you've gone through that dance to flirt, that there is relative ease for inappropriate contact. Now, here's what we're talking about in the main, is that 70% of the girls and 2/3 of the boys are engaging in sexting behavior, which they see as a byproduct of a mature relationship, meaning committed boyfriend-girlfriend. But where the problem is occurring, and what we are hearing about, is that 20% of the girls and 40% of the boys, in round numbers, are doing it casually, without any foundation in a true, intended, committed relationship. And this disconnect of 40% of the boys to 20% of the girls also underlines something that I'm going to get to next, which is the sharing gap, that as sure as I'm standing here, the sexual content gets shared on the ratio of 2 to 1. The problem that we have, and this is an issue especially with my boss, who is very keen to stop human trafficking, is that we have 15% of our teenage youth who are engaging in sexting content and sharing with complete strangers, individuals that they've only met online. And there are apps that promote this. Now, to give perspective, this too from the this is from Pew, is that by the time our teens have graduated high school, 2/3 of them will not have evolved into any form of a romantic, committed relationship. Only 1/3 of our youth will have, and 16% are not in any form of relationship at this time. So when you take this pie chart and subtract the 16 from the 35 and apply the numbers across the previous slide, what we're really talking about in terms of who's engaging in sexting, to drive home again, this is minority-driven behavior. Far, far fewer than everyone is engaging in it. It's roughly 14% of the girls, 13% of the boys in committed boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, and only 7% of the boys and 4% of the girls who are taking and engaging in risky self-disclosure outside of committed relationship, and only 4% of our youth who are truly engaging in at-risk behavior in the human trafficking realm. Now, here is the sharing gap. This too comes from the Cyberbullying Research Center, and pardon me, getting click happy here. This red line, and here across the x-axis, is ages from middle school through senior and high school, and percentages up the y. The red line is those who within the past 30 days confess that they have sent or submitted such sexually suggestive content. The blue line is those who say that I have received. Now, since we just learned that the majority of sexting occurs in the mutually committed boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, my question is, why are these two lines not one and the same? It is because, especially in our middle and early high school years where these gaps occur and diverge to the greatest degree, is it's absolutely going to be shared. Let's take a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, like my daughter is in this age range right now, an 8th grader, soon to be 9th grader here at Southeast. You're looking at, generally speaking, 5 to 7% are saying that they've generated, and right up here, we are at the 11 to 14%. 2 to 1. Okay. Ryan just sent me this text and he told me not to share it. I'm his best friend and I don't want to disappoint him, but oh my God, I can't believe that. And so I'm just going to share it to one other person. Well, 2 other people. Every one person shares it with 1 or 2 more, and it just grows geometrically, and that's how things go viral. No one's intending to violate the confidence and trust, but they can't help themselves. The ratio is 2 to 1, borne out. Until they get to be seniors in high school and start recognizing what they're putting at risk, and there's less fascination and titillation with the process. So the rule of the road about sexting is that it's an especially risky form of self-disclosure, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. Therefore, we have to know the risk and the potential consequences. I want to take you back. All of the laws of the state of Nebraska are found on this website, nebraskalegislature.gov. You can type in sexting here and not find a single reference, which means party on, Wayne, right? wrong. Sexting is too contemporary a term, and our legislature has not defined, codified, caught up to the times. You can type in pornography, since we're talking about sexually suggestive, partial, complete nudity, and pornography will cause your computer to explode, because we have done an excellent job of codifying the rules pertaining to pornography. What we're talking about here is our youth, our children, and so let's see if we can narrow the search results by typing in child pornography. Essentially, anyone under the age of 19, and more specifically, under the age of 15. And now we're getting somewhere. Earlier I said that our sexting law is our child pornography law, and the individuals involved in the case in Fairbury have run afoul of this unwittingly. But the Child Pornography Prevention Act deals with the visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct. 4 points. What they didn't know that they don't know, they now are fully aware of. First, every cell phone worth its price has a 12 megapixel or greater camera. Point shoot. If you do that and it's a sexually suggestive image and it especially involves a minor, you run the risk of potentially generating at that moment child pornography. With it on your phone, point two, now that you have it, does it exist if you haven't shared it? And the sharing ratio, the gap, 2 to 1. Okay, if you hit send or forward because you're in receipt of it, you now have just potentially distributed child pornography. Item 3, unlawful to knowingly employ, force, authorize, induce, otherwise cause a child to engage in any visual depiction. Remember the 39% versus the 21%. The boys to the girls. The boys are asking for it because they found that they can ask for it, they get it. But they're asking for it incessantly. Oh, come on, don't you know I think you're beautiful? Don't you know I'm just trying to get close to you? Don't you trust me? I won't share it, I promise. Over and over again. Bordering on harassment. Warning our children that they cannot, for sake of potentially coercing someone into providing the content, generally speaking, against their will. And then item 4, which causes most heads to explode, is that any parent, step parent, legal guardian, or person with control or custody of a child, knowing the content thereof, knowing that content sits on your child's phone that would be what is defined in the act as sexually explicit. And by the way, the reason I highlighted this term is you can go to nebraskalegislature.gov and see what exactly that means in face-blushing detail. But if you know that that content sits on your child's phone, you cannot consent to it. You have to involve law enforcement in the review of the safety and welfare of your child. You're not giving up your parental rights. But why does this law exist? It's because we have too many parents, believe it or not, who are pimping out their children, and that's one of the problems that we have in human trafficking. We have to make sure that the child's welfare is secure, because failure under any one of these 4 provisions is a felony, and this is what I'm referring to of the potential felonies that are likely unfolding and to be charged in Fairbury. Here's a case from 5 years ago. This was an 18-year-old high school senior dating a male, dating a 14-year-old high school freshman. Not unusual. Boyfriend-girlfriend, committed relationship, sexting content was shared, including Vine videos. Mom found out. Mom was incensed. Mom sought some form of redress and, long story short, sued the young man. And the young man brought before the judge was found guilty. Guilty of what? Violating the provisions of the Child Pornography Prevention Act. And the sentencing guidelines suggest that they register as a sex offender with the Nebraska State Patrol for 20 years. The judge, a fraternity brother of mine, exercised, since this is one of the first cases brought before him, that he exercised excellent judgment in taking time, counseling with the families, with the youth, the parents, and gave the following sentence. 6 months confinement, $500 fine, 3 years probation. This individual, this youth, this 18-year-old is now a man and can petition through the State Pardon Review Board to have this record expunged. He thought he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. He thought he was smarter than that. He got caught. He avoided the scarlet letter, but he still has a record. Going before the board, one of the people that he has to pass muster with is the Attorney General. We put through the office individuals who violate the Child Pornography Prevention Act behind bars. We make them register. So it's an individual case basis. This person got lucky in sentencing, but will he get lucky in terms of having this expunged? It's not a risk worth taking. So please don't let that, you younger individuals, let that happen to you. You're not 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And this is a case up in one of our parochial schools on the northern border, just to prove that it happens everywhere. This is a parochial school, and this is after school hours in terms of traditional hours, but the girls' sporting team had finished their practice for the day and had come into the women's locker room and were changing and showering, and all of it was captured by someone who had a brand new iPhone. And with that content, said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe what I've got," and chose to share it with 5 of his buddies. Every one of them was brought before the judge. Every one of them was given at least probation. The individual who would have been charged with unlawful intrusion was given confinement as well. With that said, recognizing that we are bumping up against our timeline, here comes a plethora of resources for you. So if you say or think, Ryan talks too fast, I'm glad he volunteered his slides. These will be available to you as well, but let's quickly run through them. I have referenced a number of times the Cyberbullying Research Center. What I like about this, 2 PhDs who are well educated in research, marketing research. Their statistical wherewithal, I think, is the best that I've seen in this area. They have cyberbullying down cold. They're moving into the sexting. They're bringing the sexting into context is all through this website. I think you'll love the information. But this is sit down and read information. This isn't necessarily USA Today friendly. Here is more USA Today friendly. I love this resource. It was mentioned by Abby. I'd like to underscore that as well. This is Common Sense Media. And what I like about it is that it is age and grade level specific, and it is robust. It is covering so many bases that, for example, why do we have so much cyberbullying? Well, we have a power imbalance, but we also have a lack of empathy. Lack of empathy, what's empathy? How do I teach empathy? Well, it's a modeled behavior, but it is a teachable behavior. And you can find, for example, books that teach empathy, movies that extol empathy. So you can bring tools to the table in your own home where you can model the behavior and demonstrate it through popular forms of media, and then enter into the discussion and guide your child accordingly. Even games. Then the government always likes to get in on the act, and not every government site is a great site, but here's one that I think is well worth our time, and that is stopbullying.gov. It is very robust, especially in the bullying arena, through very easy to use tabs that are robust and rich with information. I love this website. It's the notion of no child left behind, but it's no parent left behind. It is the CyberWise site, and so this is specifically to help us as parents who may feel lost understand the issue and give us guidance as how to engage with our children in a thoughtful, non-threatening manner to deal with the risks that have been laid out this evening. Then, this is an article that I think is worthwhile. This is what I made mention of today as we were on 10/11, Abby and I, and that is 3 mistakes that parents make. This will take about 3 minutes to read the article, but I thought it rang so true I wanted to clip it and make it available to you all. It's Psychology Today, and it's from April of this year, and it is the 3 things that we don't do. First of all, we need to set limits on technology. Just like there might be limits on how much TV or tube time you get and how much time playing on the gaming console, there need to be specific hours when you can engage with your digital media. And then after that hour on the clock has been reached, you check that device in, whether it's being charged for the night on the stand in the kitchen, but there are approved hours of utilization and non-utilization. Then, fill the hours with other family-driven activities, whether it's reading time, whether it's demonstrating cooking, whether it is arts and crafts, whether it is some form of social engagement, but fill the time in other ways that enrich the family experience that aren't digitally driven. And make sure, role 3, that you're setting the proper example, because more is caught than taught. And if you're glued to your device, you're demonstrating the behavior that your child is likely to follow. If you're forcing them to engage with you, be available to engage with them and recognize that you're setting the tone. Then you're thinking, wow, there is so much I have to learn about social media, Facebook, Instagram, and now Snapchat. I'm going to spend $100 at the Barnes & Noble or at the Amazon. No, it's all available for you for free online. The Connect Safely website through this address gives you the Parent's Guide to Facebook. It's since been updated. But also for Instagram and the other popular media sources as well. Do the Google search. It's time well invested and spent. Then, having grown up as a young adult and parent in the Reagan era, and Reagan through the assertion of trust but verify, helped manage our relationship with the Russians and bring down the wall. If you are a parent that wants to trust your child but feels the need to verify that they're doing exactly what you want them to do and what they tell you that they are doing, these are applications that can be put on the child's phone that are stealth, that will give you, at a time and location that you designate, that location would be your smartphone, your tablet, your personal computer, literally everything that's going on their phone in terms of text messages in, out, phone calls, photos, everything that you might want to track. mSpy is by far the market leader, but look how many others all pass muster and are all worthwhile. General cost, $5 a month. So they're right around $60 to $75 a year. And all the major cell phone carriers, if you don't want to go out and buy a third-party brand, you can do this with Sprint, you can do this with Verizon, you can do this with T-Mobile and others. Then, if you would like to velvet rope the World Wide Web so that you can direct your child to only the sites that are in their best interest, which means you don't want them going to political sites, you don't want them going to pornography sites, you don't want them going to, I don't know, religious sites, you can velvet rope through a web filter. And the one that I choose to highlight is the one that was shared with me by the state of Nebraska's CIO. It is free, it is called OpenDNS, but others that pass the PC Magazine approved test of their editors are in the right-hand column. Many of you might have heard of NetNanny. Then, this is an article that I read 2 years ago this month. It appeared in the Atlantic magazine, which is the last of the long-form journalism magazines, so it seems, with The Economist as one of the others. But this is the best article I think I've ever read on why children sext and what it means in their generation versus our generation. And it's still disturbing and alarming and concerning, but it also puts you at ease to the quote that I led with, that teenage behavior is teenage behavior. Only the tools have changed with the times. Then a book that was on the top 10 best books from Amazon last year and was the book of the month in either April or May, Girls and Sex, Navigating the Complicated New Landscape. You can get this time to time available on your Kindle for $1.99. I strongly advocate it whether you are the parent of a son or a daughter. This spells out the phenomenon of what's going in our schools in ways that we as adults can understand. It's especially timely in this era where all of a sudden, thanks to Harvey Weinstein and others, we're suddenly understanding this epidemic of sexual harassment. So, highly recommend that. It's a time well worth the investment. Then, here are the dangerous apps. And this is typically a very popular series of slides. There's only 2 slides, but first and foremost, many times your youth are smart enough to hide their snaps from you. And if it involves sexting content, well, how they're going to hide it from you is they're going to put it behind a ghost app. And a ghost app like Audio Manager, you think this is to manage their MP3s. What it is when you open it, it's a vault. And when you open it, then you have their complete cache of 10,000 images, collected, shared, searched for, stored. Calculator is extremely popular. How you know is that every cell phone, whether it's Android or Apple has a calculator, and down here this button is typically the equal sign. Look for the non-equal sign. You'll see we have the percentage sign here. It's a vault, just like Audio Manager. Then for your amusement, there's actually a very popular vault that again stores and hides all of the potentially sexting and pornographic images. It's called Vaulty. Because that smartphone has a camera on it, it is password based, and as you're cracking your child's password, because it's their birthday or something, it takes the photograph of whoever's trying to get in to the app. So the child will know right away, Mom, Dad, what are you doing? Time stamped. What were you doing last night at 10:30 trying to get into my phone? So, opportunity to dialogue. Then Snapchat. Snapchat really took root initially as a sexting app. They're trying to take it mainstream. You'll see now that just as businesses are saying you can like us on Facebook, here's our Twitter handle, or Snapchat is becoming mainstream, but it was a way for sending these sexually suggestive images because of the fact that we were mistakenly led to believe that they would fade and go away, never to be recaptured. Well, Snap Store and others have been breached. Anyone can do a screen capture. You might want to talk to your child about what they're using Snapchat for. If you're under the age of 13, you are not to have this, basically. COPPA, the seatbelt rule. So if your child's under 13 and has Snapchat, I hope they had your express permission and you had a conversation with them about why. Kick Messenger is just flat out dangerous. Kick Messenger is where there's no accountability in Kick Messenger, there's no age verification in Kick Messenger, plus Kick is a Canadian-based company, and what we have found is that in our human trafficking incidences and where our youth are being put at risk, that being a Kick buddy, which is synonymous with being a sex buddy, is the preferred means of communicating through an app that is a messaging app that also allows the exchange of videos and photos. However, because it's Canadian-based, if we wanted to issue a subpoena through our office because someone was being trafficked and we wanted to prove the case, they ignore our subpoenas. They are not under law compelled to disclose. So they are impossible to work with. Well, there we go. Hot or Not will be coming. I see I didn't get that sequencing. Ask FM. Ask FM is the first of a series of anonymous-based apps. This app first took root in Europe, then came over to America, and what it is it's an anonymous, interactive question and answer format app that was used and abused for purposes of bullying. And over 12 teenage suicides have been tied to this app specifically. So much so that the owners have gotten in and promised that they would tighten up the communication and the styles of communication that were being shared. They bumped the age minimum up to 13 and above, but there's no age verification required. So if your child has Ask FM, it's the opportunity to be curious, but why? Another opportunity for you to engage. Whisper is a social confessional app where you can whisper and you can be and you can ask and you can inquire and do anything and play roles, and this has become an app where the whispers are often of a sexual nature and putting our youth at risk because the human traffickers, the sex offenders, go and use the apps that give them the stealth that they seek. Omegle is the dangerous app that I was warning about earlier, where I talked about the 15% that are interacting and sharing sexting content with people that they've never met. Omegle is the app that facilitates that. You can see that I've said it is not an app for kids or teens. If this app is on your child's phone, I would almost say that that has risen to an emergency level. You need to uninstall that app, and I would engage in a serious conversation with your child. Their potential health and welfare is at risk. Then Vine. Vine is wildly popular. It's the video end of Twitter, and it allows you to basically share 6-second or less videos. I shared with you the instance where the 18-year-old high school male and the 14-year-old high school female, they shared Vine videos. Increasingly, those videos are of a sexual nature and can be searched accordingly. Anybody who knows how to run a semi-sophisticated search at any level will immediately find nudity, drug use, offensive language, and disturbing content on Vine. So it's not necessarily a dangerous app, but it's an app that if it's on your child's phone, again, it's an opportunity to dialogue as to why. And then Hot or Not is a potentially abusive app because it allows you largely to objectify one another by rating and ranking someone based on their appearance. It's not for individuals under the age of 13. Again, no age verification. And if you rate someone as hot and they rate you as hot, you can engage in conversation, contact, and put yourself at risk, because absolutely this is where child predators go and hang out. In conclusion, he said, 10 minutes over time, the 5 rules of the road, I thought I would leave with 5 basic principles worth imparting, and I would really focus on the fact that, again, your digital footprint is your reputation maker. Put your best foot forward by grooming your digital footprint with an awareness that it is how you will be found and easily be known, and they are selecting you out quicker than they are selecting you in. Consequently, to put your best foot forward, I think that if we can teach our children to do the right thing as in doing the kind thing and to worry less about the popularity, to not pursue the social acceptance cycle that I led with in talking about Sean Parker and how they made Facebook addictive for that social acceptance cycle. If you do the kind thing, that's a virtue. And doing the kind thing, you'll take care of all of the rest, and the negative implications that we've talked about today should fall by the wayside. And with that, I cut off the Attorney General. I had our contact. It is protectthegoodlife.nebraska.gov. Protectthegoodlife.nebraska.gov. We have more information there on digital citizenship, as well as our main site, which is ago.nebraska.gov. AGO is the acronym for Attorney General's Office. Thank you for your time and attention. I've talked over my time. If you'd like to ask your questions, I'll handle them individually. If anyone wants to ask a question for the benefit of the group, I'll take it now. But otherwise, I'm here all night. I live but blocks away. I'm happy to stay and answer your questions. Mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. Thank you for being Ironsides tonight.